The Plan Commission meeting to order. And I'd like roll call starting from my left. Because I don't have
Capital
anybody on
I
your
don't
right?
have a right.
Here. Capital here.
Dalton here.
Chumadi here.
Dilgy here.
Well, it shows who.
Certify the post. Oh, and we also have Attorney Flanagan with us and our zoning administrator, Lexi Darkwitz.
All right. So then I can certify that on Tuesday, February 4th, 2025, the agenda for the Town of Rome Plan Commission meeting for Tuesday, February 11th, 2025, was posted at the following locations: Rome Town Hall, 11:08 a.m., Quick Trip LLC, 11:23 a.m., Nakusa Port Edward State Bank, 11:15 a.m., posted on the Town of Rome website on 2/04/2025, and emailed to Wisconsin Rapids Tribune on 2/05/2025.
Thank you. A motion to approve the agenda.
So move.
Second.
I have a motion to approve the agenda by Lori, seconded by Heather. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Okay, we have any cards from the audience? No one put a card in, huh? All right, so I won't read the citizen comments, and I won't read number A either, because we don't have that going for us either. All right, so no action contemplated except possible referral to future agenda. Information updates, meeting recaps, recent correspondence, current events, announcements. Bill.
Nothing.
Heather.
Nothing for me, ma'am.
Lori.
Yep.
Aye. Thank you, dear.
You're most welcome. I know. We're getting a little cheeky here today. I have an announcement regarding the Plan Commission's Rome Town Center Subcommittee. We've been working diligently to get things ready with our town planner, Cardo, which was gifted to us. We have a community open house next week, Wednesday. It's out on our website. From 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. in the Rome Town Center, in the Rome Town Hall. We'd appreciate for you to come out. We will have some light refreshments available. And Patrick from Cardo will be here to guide and facilitate that discussion. And let me see, what else do I have? We had something brought up at the last town board meeting regarding accessory structures. We have our clerk looking into that regarding the meeting minutes. And we had discussion previously that due to the fact that we did get our baseline established by passing the form-based non-use controls, that gave us a framework to start building off as we work with a planner. So unless Lexi or Nick wanted to add anything, I think I got that covered. So, thank you.
Okay, we are having a primary election February 18th. You can come and do your voting here if you would like to start before February 18th. It's a primary, and just to clarify, you can choose 2 supervisors and 1 chairperson, and there's also superintendent of public schools that you can vote for as well. All 3 races are critical. Also, I would like to make the announcement that today is our attorney's last day for helping the Plan Commission, and I just want to say how much I appreciated all of your help. All these years, Nick, you were wonderful, and your guidance was very much appreciated. I also want to point out that at one of the town board meetings, with regard to the asking for your increase in pay, I was very upset with regard to the way that was handled by one of the supervisors. And I just want to also say, when I retired in 2005 as a paralegal, I was billing out $95 an hour. That was in 2005. What you were asking from this town, I believe, was not even enough at the time, and I still don't believe that. And again, I think you were treated very poorly, and I think that you are owed an apology.
If I could just piggyback on that, I want to thank Nick also. I was here when we brought Nick on board. We interviewed for town attorneys, And I want to thank him for his 10-plus years of service to this town and everything you've seen us through. And I greatly appreciate the work that you did for us, and I wish you all the very best in your
Yes.
exciting new position at Wood County.
Here, here.
And congratulations on that as well. Thank you. Well deserved.
More work.
Okay, any other announcements? Okay, next thing, subcommittee, Plan Commission RTC Subcommittee update.
All right. So, not that I really have to update you guys all that much.
We're all on the subcommittee.
Yeah. But the RTC subcommittee has met on January 16th, 23rd, and 30th, and February 5th. And then beginning on the 23rd, the RTC subcommittee has welcomed Master Planner Patrick Brunner from Cardo. We have been reviewing his scope of services. He has been provided our current RTC design plan, our RTC ordinances, the 15 implementation recommendations from Sam Schultz, our comprehensive design plan, and a map of all the RTC, of all the Rometown Center with all available land marked with acres labeled.
Did you include that in the packet and I'm just missing it this time, or did you not include your report in our packet this time? Did I? 'Cause
It's on the back.
on-
It's the first paragraph on the,
It's just one
On the
page.
staff
It's
report.
very little. It's
can you tell I
very
read it
little.
when you gave it to me and I forgot?
Yes.
Okay,
It's
thank you.
very,
Sorry,
very
thank you
little.
for clarifying. Yes, thank you.
And I believe that the master plan that we've been provided as a gift, there is not any amount of money that we're authorizing to be paid for at this time. It is a gift to the town of Rome by Sand Valley and Michael Kaiser
And Baker Thompson.
and Baker Thompson. And I believe there is inaccurate information on Nextdoor with regard to this issue, and perhaps some people should investigate it a little bit further before they make such statements on Nextdoor.
With that in mind, could you, Lexi, when you have a chance,
goes to the credibility of the source, as far as I'm concerned.
Lexi, if you could please put out that actual document we had from the last meeting and the meeting prior. If it's not out there as additional documents by our rope subcommittee, there's a spot on the website, and that should rectify that situation too, but
So, okay. Number 8, short-term rental staff report.
Okay. As of creating this staff report, the zoning administrator had sent out letters for one short-term rental property. Staff had included a sample letter in the packet for your review. I realized that I had messed up the date. I had updated the date before I sent out the letters. Don't
Okay, I'll
worry.
take that off of there.
But this is like just an example of what the letters look like when I send them out. The QR code actually does scan. It brings you right to the story map. It looks pretty cool if you guys had a chance to scan it with your phone. It brings you right to there. It shows. I don't know if you guys remember when I had it up on the screen, but it brings you right to that. It has, like-
excellent.
Yep, it has that heat map that I showed you guys the
Yes.
other day. It brings that up. And then every month that I add, well, not every month, but every short-term rental I add to it, I'm adding in real time. Every time I calculate it, I put the new short-term rental on there.
Excellent.
So as soon as I calculate a short-term rental, I actually just instantly put on there, publish it, and then I'm able to just keep using the same QR code. The QR code does not change, so I'm able to instantly make letters and send them out as we go, and it just stays the same. So if you are someone who gets a short-term rental letter now, and your neighbor, I don't know, in like a year decides to rent, that same QR code will still work as long as I'm using the same story map. If I update,
Oh,
yeah.
so it'll work every single time.
Yep, assuming I'm using the same story map. I'm not sure if in 2026 I'm going to decide to use a new map or not yet.
Okay.
That's up in the air depending on how cluttered I feel it looks, but that's just going to depend on how many short-term rental applications I get. As of right now, there's not that many, so.
We know how many we have total now? Are we still right around, hovering around 100 total for the community, or?
As of right now, there's 112 active
Okay.
ones.
Good.
Yep.
And what was really nice about that, sorry, I just wanted to say, I like that map because when I looked at it it was nice because it really gives you an understanding of where they are and where the need was, or where people have them, and if there's a, they're all around the golf courses at Lake Arrowhead. It shows some at Sherwood and some at Camelot, but the congregated ones really seem to be around the Lake Arrowhead golf courses. So it's a good visionary that way too for people to understand. So if they are a QR code user, this will show them where they're all located.
Yes, Nick?
Two questions to Lexi. So is this the first one we've had since we updated the process?
That is the first one. There's been one more set of letters I've sent out since I made the staff report. So now there's 2 of them. This got dated.
So this one would be really close with the deadline to get the feedback back, but did we then process this and issue it?
Yep, I was able to process it. I received no feedback from any neighbors. And then for the second one I've sent out, I sent letters out to 16 people, and it would be, I think, the deadline's in a couple days. I only received 1 call back, and it was just someone saying that they are not a fan of the short-term rental process.
So here's my loaded question, and you may not have the answer to it, but it would be, I think, helpful to have it as a metric. So for this one that's been issued now, how long from application to issuance did that take?
I believe it took just over. This one's a little bit tricky because this applicant in particular had a little bit of issues with the process, but after they actually had everything submitted, I believe it took just over 21 days. So still definitely a shortened process.
Yeah, so less than half probably of the time that it would have otherwise taken.
Yep.
It's good to acknowledge that.
Do you have the ability to determine if people are actually utilizing the QR code? Or is that something that is totally
I
segregated?
can see the views.
Oh, you can, okay.
Yep, I can't tell exactly how many people are viewing if it's those repeated views, but I can actually see how many people are looking at the story map.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I can't see how many of them are unique views, like I said, but I can see like if there's 1,000 people who look at it or whatever, but I can see people are looking at it. It's
All right.
kind of freaky, but
That's
yeah.
good to know.
Good.
Well, she's talked me out of using QR codes
I just
because
have been
people
reading
can trace
things
your
ab-
IP address and
about-
scam you, but
I just feel I'm a little bit cautious about the security issues of a QR code. I probably,
So the town's gonna scam you?
no, not the town.
Oh, well,
But I can see correlation with some of that because if they can get a hold of your IP, I mean, these are nice. It makes it convenient for people that are really, up on their technology. But I've had 3 different credit cards ever since I looked at the QR code on our Roku to sign up for different channels. So there's some,
I don't know.
but I think it's
just-
great that you can find out who's looked at it and used it because that keeps us abreast of how people are viewing the short-term rental thing that you created for us.
Yes, and this is
Makes it
through-
more efficient.
Yep, and then because it is through our ArcGIS, it's a super encrypted site, so
Oh,
there is almost
Excellent.
Yeah, I do not have any worry about anyone being able to take anyone's IP through it. It is very, very,
End-to-end
very
encryption.
heavily
Excellent.
protected. I think they would instantly notice some sort of data breach like that, and they would instantly be able to monitor that. They have
Then I'll look at your QR
Yes.
code when I get home
Yes,
later.
they have a team in Redlands, California, a huge team that monitors that type of stuff. They have a bunch of different branches throughout the world that monitors it. So
Excellent.
it's very secure. So
Thank you.
I feel very, very safe using it.
So we have a government system in place that's actually working, which is really, really good. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Which means that this is going to be a really short meeting. Okay, so, now, discuss and possible action on the following items. Approval of the January 14th, 2025 meeting minutes.
I'll move approval as written.
I will. Just double checking because I read it when I
That's
picked
fine.
up my packet a while ago. those, so I'm just double checking.
We have time.
Why did we call for a oh, never mind. Okay, I'll second the motion.
Any discussion? I have a motion by Bill to approve, seconded by Lori. Any discussion? None? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? Minutes are approved. Okay. I think we'll wait on number 10.
Hopefully Shane will get it.
So we'll have that later on in our meeting. Hopefully he comes. So then we'll go to 11. Discussion and possible referral to future agenda, the comprehensive plan review and outline work for updating to include setting time frame, discussion of state requirements for compliance, and what work needs to be accomplished. So that is with regard to our comprehensive plan.
So then I just said, the Plan Commission will begin a cursory review of the Town of Rome Comprehensive Plan and set an outline for updating it. Discussion will include determining the time frame, identifying key tasks, reviewing state compliance requirements under Wisconsin statutes, and confirming how often the plan must be updated. This meeting will help establish a clear path forward for the update process.
Exactly. Okay, so I believe that a comprehensive plan, according to statute, has to be done every 10 years.
Correct.
And the last one was done in 2016, which means we need to have one in place, totally in place by 2026, which is 1 year away. The last time, I think, when we did this one, I saw notations in here that said they began the process in 2013. So they were working on it for 3 years, and we have 1 year to get all of this done. So we are kind of like under a time crunch here, I think, unless the people that are going to be working on it are going to have the past experience and have it.
Well, I think what's going to be helpful this time is Lexi went to school at UWSP, and Rebecca, who gave us our training last fall, has done a lot of these plans around the state. Once you have your baseline like that, there's no reason why we can't build off of what we already have with some of the newer ideas that have come along in the past 10 years, which will also save us money. There's a misunderstanding out there that this was already started a couple of years ago, and that is not correct. Checking back with Dennis Lawrence up at North Central Regional Planning, they had gotten a couple of map changes in summer, I believe, of 23, and nothing was contracted with them to do a new plan, so we are under a timeline to get it done for 2016. But I think with the resources we have with Lexi's schooling from Point, with the and the board's now, or this committee's knowledge of what goes on in our community and the changes we faced, that this will be a much easier process than it was the very first go around.
Okay, Nick.
Well, and just to give a nod to the work that a subcommittee did, because there was a fair amount of work that was done. So just to follow up on the comment, although there wasn't a official adoption of that, there was a significant amount of work that was done by a subcommittee that went through each of the elements, went through those elements, and afterwards the goals, objectives, and policies that were related to them. And so I say that because that, if we can pull that information, that could also be a good point in time to look at what was done there. I know we went through it element by element, spent also a fair amount of time on the land use section in the future land use map. And so that, coupled with the baseline that you have, I think will make the process a bit more efficient. But yes, you'll want to have a planner involved, either North Central was who you had back in 2016. There are definitely other resources and some that are doing it very well, but they'll help you get through the public participation plan. You'll need to reaffirm that and then go through each of your elements. But it will be far more efficient, I suspect, because of the work that the subcommittee had done in going through those element by element and reassessing whether or not the goals, objectives, and policies that were in those elements were ones that we needed to update. And I believe just about every one of those elements had some updates to it.
I think what's also important to know is that North Central Regional Planning does do these for communities and counties, but they're very boilerplate. And that's why with Lexi's experience and connections at UWSP and things that we've learned as we've gone through this, I do believe it'll be a much more efficient process this time. And there's enough that we can glean from other communities that have done their own plans with planners. And what we don't know or understand, Lexi also has other resources that she can get information from, be it Sam, who's a land use developer, or even some of the things we'll be going through with Cardo for the RTC. So those will all fit together like puzzle pieces to help us get to an updated plan that we can have done by the end of the year. I feel very comfortable.
So can we go through, just so I can formulate this in my head, can we go through the step-by-step process that if we started something today, what would the next step be, and the step after that from beginning to fruition, so that we can have an idea of what our
Steps would, or each phase would be.
right. And at each phase, I would like to know who do we contact at each phase to get through that one. That's kind of like, okay,
All right. So before even phase one, right, I think it would be beneficial to bring on whomever is going to facilitate this process, right? Certainly Lexi has the capacity to walk through a lot of this, but you'll still want to have a planner. Again, I said
Someone like Sam, is
North
that?
Central, Sam would certainly be able to assist with it, but it's somebody that will help go through those legal requirements, for the comp plan review. Get that in place. It's not somebody, again, that needs to be utilized every single meeting. It's definitely not. But somebody that can be that resource and kind of set the guardrails and guidelines throughout it. So that would be step one, and I would say that even happens before phase one. Then, when you bring them in, they're going to have you go through a process to do your public participation plan. You've had one already. You do one every single time that you do a comprehensive revision, but you'll adopt that. Now, what you have, as Lori mentioned, is very boilerplate. North Central does very boilerplate ones. You can have as much public participation as you want, right? And so you can have a public participation plan that includes a bit more dialogue as to opportunities for public participation than maybe just the baseline, public hearings, for example.
Okay, and I did notice that the PPP is something that the town board has to initiate and do. Is that correct?
Ultimately, they adopt it, but I would say that I would call that phase one. And that phase could be started with you, right, and recommended up to the town board. So it certainly doesn't have to begin and end with the town board. It would end with the town board, though, in the actual approval of the public participation plan, yes.
Okay.
Then a lot of my legal steps in the rest of our phases are going to sound very familiar because we do update our comprehensive plan from time to time. So your phase two is going to be going through each of those elements. So you have to have certain elements. Those elements that are in our comp plan are not there by accident. They have to be there. Okay, so things like issues and opportunities, housing, transportation, utilities and community facilities, agriculture, natural and cultural resources, economic development, intergovernmental cooperation, land use, and implementation. Those are all required elements to your comp plan.
Required, okay.
They are.
They're already all in there.
They are.
It's already all, the framework's already in the one.
So what you would do in that phase, and I'll just, for simplicity's sake, I'll wrap it all into the same phase. In that phase, you're going to do something very similar to what that subcommittee did. That's why I wanted to pay nod to that, because that subcommittee did what that phase would look like. They went through those elements one or two at a time, right? And reviewed the content in it,
and then reviewed that last page. The last page of every one of your elements is going to have the goals, objectives, and policies. Okay, and so that is a step in each of those elements that you need to go through. Again, looking back at the work that that subcommittee did will definitely get you a head start in that, but it doesn't need to be what you ultimately approve.
Right.
Just remember, again, that the land use section has your narrative, it has your goals, objectives, and policies, and remember, just as we've seen before, relatively routinely, land use will also have your future land use map. And so remember that that's one's going to have a map associated with it that you should spend some time with and ask if that still fits with what our community is looking for, right? And so you'll spend time through each of those. And then once you get through that, then the process is very similar to what we've seen before, unless you have additional steps in your public participation plan, right? Because if you have those extra steps, if you want to do those additional public participation opportunities, then you may have some additional phases in there, right? Some input opportunities that involve the public if you choose to do that. Otherwise, the actual adoption of it is going to look very similar to what you do when you do a
Ordinance.
Revision.
future land use map amendment, for example. So you're going to have your Class 1 notice 30 days in advance, a public hearing, the recommendation from this body to the town board, and then the approval by the town board. We've just in the exact same way that we've seen. So really the catch there is, as you work through what your public participation plan is going to look like, your public participation opportunities might be, that may add some additional steps. But your process from beginning to end would look like that.
I just want to touch on, elaborate just a little bit more too, when you said that about boilerplate. It really, and no knock against them, at the time when we did our first one, they were a great help. It was bare bones, it was our first one out of the gate. And so now with again, Lexi, the resources, she has UWSP, we also have Sam, and we also have Patrick. So as we're doing all these other things, that'll lend to what we might want to modify in here. And like Nick said, we don't have to have them included every time. We can have these discussions amongst ourselves, because I think we're getting a pretty clear understanding of how, especially after some of the changes we've made along the way over the last couple of years, things we want to see in there and the direction we want it to go. The future land use map wasn't even adopted and done in 23 when that was sent up there. So it's very important that we get going. God bless you.
Bless you.
That we get going, and I think with Rebecca up again at UWSP, the ones that she's worked with other communities, she has charged a fee for that, but it'll be much more modest than it would be with North Central Regional Planning, especially with Lexi being familiar with her and having worked with her in the past. So I think we've got a really good opportunity to come out with a really good plan moving forward with those resources.
Just out of curiosity, what does something like this cost?
Well, when we did it, I think it was about six or 7,000, but now you're looking probably closer to 10 or more.
Right, so some of the catch there is that over time, I remember back in the early 2000s, for example, there were grants available that covered a lot of it, and there may have been as well in the 2013 to 2016 time. And so sometimes those are grant supplemented, but
Ours wasn't.
so when you talk about bringing in, somebody maybe from UWSP, they probably have a rate. Also, their rate may involve some of the, attendance at meetings or facilitation that may not be needed, at all times. And so you could just get a quote from her and kind of go from there. It'll probably look very similar to what was paid in the past. If it was 5,000 or 6,000, maybe that sounds maybe a little bit high for what you'll actually need. Only because you may not need all of that at every meeting,
You
right?
have the base plan already.
Yeah. So it might be facilitating a public participation, kind of session. It may be coming to one or two of your meetings for elements, and it may be also helping with the kickoff. And then, from there, the actual adoption, when you get to that point, they could probably help review some of the documents that you'll need to draft, but you could probably handle that even without them, just because we've done it so often here.
And I
Some
know-
communities don't do updates to their comprehensive plan nearly as much as this town does.
That's why I don't think it would be very labor intensive, but we were at some training where there was a gentleman also presenting from UW Local Government Institute in Madison, and the UW Madison planners. Theirs were running, and that was 2 years ago, anywhere from 6 to 10. So, I mean, they also have resources down at UW Madison. So, you know, depending on how they're used and how often you bring them in or whatever, again, we got Lexi that can help facilitate some of this. We can facilitate some of it. I mean,
The other question I had is, if for some unknown reason we're not able to get this completed by the end of 2026, are there, what are the ramifications of that? Does the state come down and
I think
hammer us or
potential
something?
grants may be held.
In jeopardy?
Yep.
Okay.
well, grants, when you say that in jeopardy, though, those are ones we would apply for once we have it done. But
Right.
grants that we, just like the corp
Not,
plan,
not
they
anything
can't,
that's proved prior to.
no, just like with the corp, if you have your corp done with a master park plan, they ask you to adopt and put in there. It doesn't mean you're gonna do everything specifically on that plan. You know, I mean, but they want to see that you're doing this. They don't, it's in law that you update it, but it's not like they're gonna come beating down our door and whip us in the public square. It's like they just want you to have planning done, and then same thing with the corp. They want you to have it done, because then it goes into a state type plan or a county type plan that we have our own planning. So, but as far as grants to get them done too, we can look and see. There weren't any out there when I last checked after speaking with Dennis Lawrence, but there may be something new again. So we can always look and see. But when you said that about upholding other grants, it means once the plan's done, there might be something we can request that they want to know that you have your comp plan in place, so we're gonna go according to your comp plan or your corp plan.
Right.
That's when they
That's what
come
I'm
into
saying.
play.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I just wanted to clarify it, because some people get hung up on one or two words.
I would agree. I think the important thing is that you're starting this process and working through it. It hasn't been uncommon for me to see communities that I represent that go past that deadline, by a bit. It's
Okay.
I've seen it a number of times, but they've been working on it. Maybe they, spend a bit more time on a certain element, for example, that just wasn't a big deal for them maybe 10 years ago, but really is a big deal now, right? And so it's going to take some time, to work through some of that. And if it pushes you beyond, just remember it's the 2016, which means you have this year and all of next year.
That's 2 years.
Lexi, have you been able to find the subcommittee file?
I have not done a deep dive.
Okay.
So there was a subcommittee then on this?
Two
And are you-
members of the CDA and two members of the Plan Commission
Okay,
met at the request of the then chair, Carl Hasdell, to review certain chapters. We didn't do them all. We did the major chapters and come back with recommendations. And the biggest thing, and is what Nick said, the land use and the maps. And we really spent a lot of time on redrawing the maps to try and consolidate where growth should happen for housing versus where you want to leave it as pristine as possible.
And my recollection is that going into that, somewhat before that, there was maybe a SurveyMonkey survey sent out. Do you recall that?
Oh, boy.
It was some form of community input, or at least it was referenced during our subcommittee meetings that there was some feedback provided from a survey, and I think it was probably just an online survey. I don't know if it was specific to that comp plan or if it was rather in regards to maybe the design manual or something like that, where we used some of the feedback that was received to help guide what work we were doing.
And I think they accept that now too, if you can get surveys to garner information, that the state or, the planners, they're open to getting information from people that way as well. But you had made another point earlier in your comment that I was gonna touch on that was interesting, but it'll probably come back to me in a bit.
I think to,
Oh, I know, excuse me, can I do it while I
Yeah.
have that memory?
sure, I know how you feel.
Yeah. Some of these things, you know, the one thing I feel really good about too, about this process this time is that this committee doesn't have to deal with short-term rentals like it did before. And we can get down to the brass tacks of what we're really here for. And that's where, you know, before subcommittees were helpful, but when you ask people to meet for an additional set of people, that it's getting harder to get those people to come and meet, you know, that this committee now has the capacity to work on this themselves and bring those things to the board on a regular basis. Or what, you know, and if anything has to be pushed off to CDA for their questions or what have you. Where before, when we did our initial one, it went through the town board. The town board, we did that in 2016, our board did, I believe, with some input from the plan commission. Well, now we have the time and the capacity that even if we chop off one or two sections at a time, or one chapter at a time, I think we could easily get that done. And there's enough thoughts here that they'll bring the ideas forward, that this group, again, has the capacity to do it with Lexi's. I don't know, you know, I just
Yeah, I
believe that
think
we
you do.
can. We don't need a separate subcommittee.
I would like to propose that we begin an outline and determine what chapters we can go through quickly
Yeah,
and get
that's-
those behind us, and have an outline so that at our commission meetings, we can just whittle away at this over the next 6 or 7 months until we get to the really hard parts.
The meaty stuff.
The meaty stuff, but I would like to see an outline of the chapters that we feel we can get down with Lexi's help, or possibly, like background and demographics. That's like US Census Bureau kinds of things that we need to get that information from. It's things that we really don't have to go into depth and detail. We can just pick it up from specific,
I think that's a good point. You know, anything that we think is easy enough to just go through and it's pretty,
Right.
it's just information that we have to get from somewhere else and regurgitate it in our document.
Right.
Get that aside and then you're saving the tough for last, but nonetheless, that's where you want to spend most of your time.
But I also think if we're in this kind of a mode and
Yeah.
we've got an outline and we're going through it, in 4 or 5 months, we'll know basically how we're all thinking in a direction, and we'll be able to tackle it a lot. Like even the goals and objectives and things, we'll be more familiar with it because we're tackling some of the easier ones first, and we'll get a mindset going.
I think that's very helpful, because we've done it at the subcommittee meetings. We've kept ourselves on task with charts and outlines, and
Yeah.
so I think that, I agree, that's a good way to approach it.
So I would like to at least for...
Madam Chair,
Oh,
just
yes.
maybe just one other comment, because Bill touched on it. Along with the outline, if you had that, and then also brought at least the goals, objectives, and policies from the subcommittee's work, you know, the elements that were worked on, because I do believe that although some were focused on for far more time than others, I do believe each of those elements were worked through. Maybe, you know, not really updated, you know, a whole lot, but worked through. If you had that in your packet as well, some of those sections will have a lot of goals, some might have a couple goals. So if you have that, then you'll be able to get an idea of maybe,
And you can compare what was changed.
yeah.
Do
And
you still have your notes from when you were on that committee, or no?
I don't know.
Okay.
I
So
probably
maybe
have
we
a
can
box
task-
somewhere.
they
Maybe
would,
we can task Lexi with having that for us for our, you know, doing your deep dive you need to and get that information from us. It's probably pulling some meeting minutes and things like that and notes, but
packets from online. would
packets
be-
from online,
would
and
have
maybe
them.
we can even go back and read through them ourselves and just get prepared, but she would have,
I don't know if that, was that subcommittee online?
The packets, yeah, the subcommittee agendas and I
oh, they're
believe
not on
packets.
there anymore
I don't
though.
remember.
It's not on there anymore.
I think
Seen
so.
it lately.
It's because this is kind of racking my brain a little bit, but I think that they are actually folded into the plan commission. So you'd have to go into the plan commission
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
and work back, because you'll see dates that were in there a couple. So like
Reports.
in a month, you'll see 3 meetings, and in there you'll see those subcommittee meetings, I believe were in the Plan Commission section. And if you go into those and find the subcommittee meetings, I believe the packets were uploaded, and the packets will have each of those elements. But you'd have to go back to when that subcommittee met, and that would have been maybe 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, because
Three.
I was on CDA.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and you were working through issues they wanted to get settled in certain segments of town that were more important, that were important to
There
them
was-
at the time, but
There were other ancillary things brought into that committee.
yes, exactly. So it wasn't
But
focused
that was-
just on
That was
redoing
more
this.
towards the end. That wasn't
Correct.
during, we got our goal and objectives accomplished.
Yes,
Before we started going off.
off on those tangents for specific items in certain neighborhoods.
But just so if any of you or Alexia are looking for it, I think start in the Plan Commission area, because I think they were put into the Plan Commission section, not under, for example, its own committee. I think they were actually up in the Plan Commission
That's
section.
good to know. Oh, now that you say that, Nick, I think I do, because they put it under joint subcommittee notes, I think, under additional documents. So Lex will have to go back, we can go back and,
Wouldn't know because I wasn't on here.
Lori's right. It's got a note, I think, that says something like joint subcommittee. or something.
subcommittee meeting or something like that.
Okay, so I think if we can at least, maybe the April meeting, begin tackling this a little bit. Maybe even just trying 2 of our chapters, go through 2 of them.
Do we want to touch on the outline or anything, or in March?
February and March, I think if we come back with the ones we think might be easy.
I think so, yeah. Yeah.
And then tackle the meat and potatoes starting in April. You could get the easy ones in our outline, the goals, objective, policies, if they've got that, see if there's anything we need to tweak.
So I think for the agenda for March would be the development of the outline. And then we'll have the development of the outline, and then for the April meeting, on the agenda, we can tackle maybe 2 chapters or 1 chapter, or whatever, the commission feels is something that they want to take on for April. But I wouldn't want to do a lot, maybe just get our toes in there a little bit, and then
Get us
feel.
reacquainted.
So that we can start seeing how the discussion goes.
Right, and-
about revisions.
Right, and then, if we can find those packets, maybe, we can just go to the packets and do a cursory review of those. Just, nothing in depth, just get us on the thinking phase as how we want to tackle this. So March would be, the development of the outline, and then April would be tackling 1, maybe 2 of the chapters. And seeing, as we look at them and how we want to implement them or go forward with it, then we can determine what we will be utilizing, like the U.S. Census Bureau data, or whatever Lexi recommends as far as what we should look at or what we should be doing too.
I have 2 questions. First, go back to what Nick said, and one of the first things you want to tackle is your public participation before you even start reviewing. You want to decide how many times or when are you going to go out to the public. That's one of the elements.
That might be putting I think, maybe,
One of the elements, that's what you're supposed to have in place before you start the plan revision.
Is
I
that,
believe.
is that
Am I
correct?
not correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so,
So that's item number 1. Then you have to also decide, are we going to bring in some outside help to help us do this? Those are 2 elements that we should be discussing at our next meeting,
Yeah,
in addition to the outline.
those were what I called the things that happen before
step
phase
1, step 2 before the phase.
I actually said that happens before phase 1.
yeah, that's what
Right.
I have it drawn out here, is step
Yeah.
1 and step 2 are prior to phase 1.
All right, so then we will do that, the PPP in March, get that going, and then make a determination as far as who we would want to bring on board. Well, utilizing Lexi as one of our big resources would be number 1.
Absolutely.
And then
Do you want her to reach out to the person at Stevens Point? and
Rebecca?
See what there would be see if she would, number one, have the time.
Number two, the
And number
rate.
two, what she would charge if she
For
did
the
have the
rate.
time.
Which
Just
I
to
think
have
it
a
would be
feel.
modest compared, I mean, it's gonna cost, but it'll be modest compared to, having our,
Are you willing to do that for us? Do you think she would be a good resource for us?
She could.
she's presented at many, you weren't in her school of study, you were in the neighboring school of study, but she even presented at our training that evening and she's done it for the WTA, the Wisconsin Towns Association. She's done plans, comprehensive plans like all over the
No, it sounds like
state.
she's got a good,
She has a very good
She's very
background, and I think Lexi
knowledgeable.
would work well with her.
So otherwise, I know one of my mentoring professors did do a lot of stuff similar. I know I reached out to him.
it doesn't
But
hurt-
he has a
it
little
doesn't
bit
hurt to
different
have a
thought
couple
process
different
than
ones.
what people are accustomed to here, Lexi. So I'm just suggesting to you with the fact that Rebecca seemed to fit in really well with our training, but, I mean, maybe you could check with both of
One
them.
was a land use planner from
Right.
Madison.
Right. Right, but I'm just,
I would check with both.
Okay,
yeah,
Nick,
check with both.
Nick,
Just, just a plug for you all that, so if you're going to have your public participation plan on your next meeting, if you look at your current comp plan, page 77 and 78 are the relevant pages and would probably be good to include in your packets. 77 being the public participation plan.
yep, and then the
And you'll see
resolution.
underneath that is what I was talking about as far as different public participation opportunities. 1 through 5 is how it exists in the plan. It doesn't have to be 1 through 5, right? It can be a number of things or additional items, so that would be a good starting point when you talk about this and maybe identify some other things. And then, as Chairwoman mentioned, the public participation plan resolution, which will ultimately go to the board, is then, that'll give you an idea of what that looks like. But really, the meat of that is that page 77.
The reason I keep referring to UWSP too is they've got so much, Lexi can tell you this too, or Lexi can, there's a lot of information online. They've got even outlines online of how they've helped communities do their plans. So again, those resources there, that you can go out yourself and see it right on the UWSP website. And they have things that we can refer to and use as well. So that would help all of us understand the process.
I also know that, I mean, from experience, I know in my undergrad that if people, I know when communities reached out to our professors, a lot of times the professors would allow us to do individual projects with those communities to work with them. Like I ended up by making a park plan for Cronenwetter. Like the actual village that went to one of my classes and wanted a park plan, and a couple of my class peers and we went and made a full park plan with them.
Did a good job on it too.
So
So then our resource would be you and then Rebecca.
And
If-
who,
if you
and the
can
other
reach
one
out.
that she had, Rebecca, and the other one that she has, that Lexi mentioned.
So we would just need to know if they would be, number one, available, number two, what their rate or their service cost would be. And that we would take care of at the next meeting. Would that be enough time for you to get back to us on that? Okay. And that doesn't mean that we wouldn't tap anyone else. This is just like our starting point, right? Okay. And then, the PPP, get that put into place with the town. And then, we could also begin our outline for the next one. We could just start our outline as far as how we want to start to tackle this. And then that would be a good starting point, get us going. I've heard about this for 3 years and I can't believe we're actually gonna do it. Well, some of you will be.
Actually,
right.
it's exciting because the times they are changing, so we'll get it updated.
Well, and that's-
it'll help us too.
And that's another thing to bring in, to think about how our town has evolved since 2016.
And how it might
and how it might even go more so, and, to keep that in mind, especially with the future land use, and, these are all issues that have been coming before the Plan Commission. So it's, things that we have to keep in mind as we're doing this. So,
I thank you for the discussion. I thank everybody. Well, you got to keep it down a little bit. You just keep interrupting
She
there.
can't
and I know
talk.
she can't. She's got a sore throat, but
okay, so, is there any more discussion on this right now? Or we pretty much are going? Anything else, Nick, that you would like to, your wisdom and your advice for us in the future?
Only just a general note that I think if you work through the public participation plan and then get an idea of what that cost would be, both of those things could kind of consecutively go to the town board and be considered. That would be a good launch point, would be them approving that public participation plan, approving whomever is going to come through and assist, and however that's going to look, and then that'll task you all with your work that you'll be doing as you go through the comp plan.
Okay,
Might be helpful to the members that are missing today that when you do the minutes, send the minutes of this section out prior to the rest of the minutes. Can we do that? Is that legal?
Yes.
Just as a way of saying, here's your assignment for the next meeting, so that they have an ample opportunity to review the things that we are. Because, technically, we can start tomorrow. They won't know it.
well, and she
So
can
as
put
soon as
a
they-
watermark on there that says drafts unapproved meeting
Yeah.
minutes or whatever.
Well, and
so
I
that
think,
would help
I think
us.
what was suggested was just the excerpt from it,
I'm just
Right,
giving them a
right.
heads up for the homework.
which
That's all I'm
can
saying.
just be, sent as an overview of what
Yeah.
was discussed.
That's true.
It's not minutes that anybody
Right.
will be approving.
No, it shouldn't affect anything.
Thank you for that, Nick.
or YouTube minutes, 425 through 450. Okay, so, any other discussion on this? Lexi, any, good? Okay. All right, so the next item, number 12, discussion and possible referral to future agenda, review of potential zoning regulations for small-scale solar energy installations.
Alright, so the Plan Commission will review potential zoning regulations for small-scale solar energy installations to ensure they align with the town's development goals and state guidelines. Discussion will include identifying appropriate zoning districts, setback requirements, aesthetic considerations, and any necessary permitting processes. The Commission will also consider best practices for balancing renewable energy expansion with community interests. This meeting will help establish a framework for potential ordinance updates or new regulations.
All right, I'm up. Okay, so that was a lot, and I think that's a good framework for what, will ultimately be tackled here as you work through some potential options for regulations of solar energy systems. My homework for this meeting was to put together some resources for you because I felt like that was a good place to kind of start you off with and also leave you with to kind of know how you might want to approach this. And so I did two different things with that. It's all encompassed in your in the packets that I provided to you. But first, this document is a really great document. All right, this document, although you'll see in the page numbering, I only included the relevant parts of that packet. The relevant parts being that which relates to regulation of solar energy systems, small-scale solar energy systems. There is there's a lot of information in the full packet with regards to other solar regulations and what you can and cannot do, including the large scale. So I'll just make maybe a plug for that. That this is a very good resource. It is more comprehensive than what I provided to you. I simply provided to you the relevant sections to give you the overview as to what you can regulate in this field. Because although you can regulate in this area, because we're small scale, so 90, less than 100 megawatt, you still have some limitations, and that's what I'll go over with you. The other two things, just to kind of round out what I handed to you, I gave two different examples of communities that are in our area, I'll call it, and by area, it's a little bit of an expansive area, but the communities are the city of Wisconsin Rapids, who have updated theirs a couple different times. I think they have a pretty good framework for regulating this, and I'll walk us through what that looks like. And the other one, and unfortunately it just didn't print out with the title on it, so keep you guessing until I tell you. It's the Village of Plover. That's theirs. And actually, I there's some things that I like about each of them. I'll walk you through, in summary form, what they're doing and how they're doing it. And again, the goal here is to give you a legal framework, and then give you some examples of communities that are doing this well in somewhat different ways, so you have some examples to build off of, because there isn't a one size fits everybody, right? That it doesn't work like that with ordinances, as we know. So you may see some things in each of them that you like, some maybe approaches in one of them that you like, but regulations in the other one that you like. So I give you both of them because they're both somewhat similar in how they approach it, but they do have a little bit different kind of framing in their ordinances and also regulations. So I thought they were both very good examples which to kind of build from. So then I'm going to take you back to this packet, the Solar Energy System Development Packet, and I'll just say that so. That packet gives, I think, the overview of both the statutory framework in which you're working within, and also the case law framework. Because what happened here is that we have a statute that gives us our ability to regulate this, and what that ability exactly is. If you go to the second page being on the bottom 11. So not to make this overly confusing, but the second page of your packet is page 11. On the right-hand column, about halfway down, what that does is gives you the overview of the statute that regulates this. The statute specifically is 66.0401, and what it says there is that zoning regulations must be enacted within some narrow guidelines. So those regulations need to do one of three things. It either needs to preserve or protect the public health or safety. It needs to not significantly increase system cost or decrease efficiency. And it needs to allow for an alternative system of comparable costs and efficiency. Now, that's the way that the statute is framed, but then case law gave us some further definitions of exactly what that means. So the relevant case in point is Eckler Brothers. It's summarized in this packet, so you don't need to.
So you're not going to read it to us?
I could if we're looking for a
Bedtime story.
for some time.
Well, the one
but-
I'd really like you to touch on, if you can, not to interrupt you, is how Numeric and the city of Mequon in 2001 is really part of what affects us all.
Well, actually, the case that is on point for this is going to be Eckler Brothers, because
know,
what
I
Eckler
know
Brothers
for this.
did
Okay.
is it said, number one, confirmed that the local control of these systems has to meet one of those three criteria. So, really, Eckler Brothers is the case on point here when we're talking about regulation of these systems. The second one, and I think it's important because it's going to lead into what I review with you on some of these community examples, is that Eckler Brothers said that municipalities need to rely on the facts of an individual situation in order to regulate these. Okay, that's going to sound somewhat familiar. It's going to sound a lot like a conditional use permit, right? What they're saying is that in situations where you're analyzing this, you can't, they call it a cart before the horse situation, they reference it. But the idea being that where you're putting in certain review steps, you need to be reviewing them on case-by-case situations, okay? which is going to sound a lot like and look a lot like a conditional use permit. So I say this with a bit of irony in it, because in other situations, we've talked about this idea of moving away from conditional use
Yeah.
permits. In this area, you're really looking at a conditional use permit for certain regulations, okay? And so then the other nice thing that this summary gives you is some guidelines, I think, for how ordinances can be framed. It also does give a reference to some existing ordinances that may be at risk of being against what the Eckler Brothers case came out of. So what I would say is the page that starts with 14, that page gives a good overview of some of the things that you'd want to have in an ordinance. For example, definitions, and you're going to see those in the examples that I give you. Looking at maybe potential impacts on other neighboring properties, and in what situations might those impacts be significant enough to warrant this idea of a case-by-case review of these systems. So things like that, are what we'll go over when I go through the examples. So let's keep that off to the side, and then I'll go through some of these community examples with you. I'm going to start with the Village of Plover, the one that starts with solar energy. In each of these examples, what I did was I included in your packets their information page. So one thing that I think these communities do very well, and in fact the communities that are doing it the best do, is they have a information page. So they try to summarize the information for people that are interested in pursuing small-scale solar developments, and gives an overview of what the approval steps are in each scenario. And I say each scenario because what the village does is it segments it in, I would say, four areas of different scenarios. Number one is going to be roof-mounted systems. Okay, that's one scenario. The second scenario is ground-mounted. Actually, the second and third scenarios are ground-mounted. Okay, so you got your roof-mounted and you have your ground-mounted systems. In your ground-mounted systems, the village separates those out, ground-mounted systems that are under 900 square feet in size, and ground-mounted systems that are over 900 square feet in size. So they treat those a little bit differently. And then they have another scenario where it's ground-mounted in commercial and manufacturing districts. So in those situations, they have an additional step and process to it. Okay, so let's start back with the first one of those scenarios, roof-mounted systems. What they're saying in their ordinance is that roof-mounted systems are permitted and they require a building and electrical permit. Those are the requirements with roof-mounted systems. So in that village, that's the regulation, and then you'll see under it's 1A, it's pretty low barriers to putting a system like that in place. They work through what that building permit looks like and the electrical permit, and that's your process required to mount your roof-mounted system. When you're doing a ground-mounted system, again, the under 900 square feet, perhaps unsurprisingly, is going to be easier than your above 900 square feet.
Can I just ask one question? I'm sorry, to go back to the roof-mounted systems. Is if you had like the Menards and they wanted a roof-mounted system, would it fall under this, where they would only require a building permit and electrical? Or,
Did you say Menards?
Yeah,
You mean
what
you can buy
Menards?
kits at Menards for?
no, on the top of
Talking about
Menard's
on the top
roof.
of a Menard's building.
Well, that would
I
be
was like-
down here on commercial. I
I'm
think
sorry.
is- So I think that is,
But it would be roof mounted.
It's a roof mounted system.
see what you're saying. What I would probably do, because I like the regulations for commercial and manufacturing, I think it probably would make more sense to have those kind of regulations in everyone, because what the regulations, to skip all the way to step 4, for ground-mounted systems there, it would need to have a site plan review as well.
Right, but
But I get what you're saying. So, the way this reads, the answer would be building and electrical, which I think is probably a little low barrier for a large system that it could be very large on your roof in those kind of commercial and manufacturing districts.
yeah, and I was just wondering why they didn't segregate out businesses and residential.
Well, they certainly do on ground mounted
On
systems.
ground mounted,
Yeah.
but not on the, okay, that was my question, sorry.
Okay,
No,
so
but that's good,
it
though.
is a good
That's
question.
good, but that's a
I mean,
good-
that,
that's
so
a
you're
good
thinking about
question.
the bigger picture here, right? And what you're thinking about is how this might work, how something like this might work in this community, right? And things that maybe aren't in place in the village, because again, I'm not advocating that any of these are the silver bullet, right? I'm just giving you them as examples of ways that this could be approached and is approached in certain communities. So ground mounted in residential districts with systems less than 900 square feet in size, those are regulated again with just the building and electrical permit. It's permitted in every district. Over 900 square feet, as you can imagine, might have impacts on the adjacent properties. In that case, they are processing that through as a conditional use permit, again, going back to what we talked about with the rules that exist. If we're going to start to put some additional requirements on them, we need to do it as a case-by-case basis. That's why they're doing that in those kind of situations. Somewhat similarly with ground-mounted systems in the village and commercial and manufacturing districts, they are running that through a site plan review as well, which you think about our process here and what that might look like, that would make some sense, right? So just an idea of how they're approaching this, right? But then when you look at, and I glossed over it probably too quickly, the ground-mounted systems in those situations that are less than 900 square feet, you'll see that they still have size and setback references there. In other words, you can still regulate them as far as where they might be placed. You know, are they placed in the front yard, for example, or are they inside and rear yard setback, areas? The setbacks, might apply in those situations and how they apply. The village is still doing that there. It's just where they have an additional permit or where they're taking it through a conditional use permit or a site plan review is depending, as you can see, on is it ground or roof mounted? What's the size? What's the potential impact on the adjacent properties and the neighborhood and the characteristics of the neighborhood? So I think they do a good job in a couple areas. So I'll just kind of point out where I think they're doing a good job with it. Number one, I like the overview, and I like actually both of the examples I gave you as overviews. I think they give a good overview of information that they put on their website. And they, anybody that's interested in this can go there, see what resources are out there, because what they do beyond just their community, they also give resources that are out there to the state, right? And so they give that information to the public. I think that they do a good job with that and have that set up well. And the other thing that I like about it is you'll see that section that I gave you, that's the section. This isn't a hugely complicated ordinance, right? It's not something that's sending you in 5 different places to find the information that you're looking for.
Oh darn.
And so I think that they do a good job putting it in a concise manner that is easy to follow if you're looking at doing a small scale development, either roof mounted or ground mounted on your property. You're not looking in 5 different places. It's just there. I think they do a good job there.
I know that they show greater than 900 square feet, so that they don't have like a limitation either on the opposite end.
but they treat it as a conditional use permit.
Right, okay.
And that's where your conditions would come in.
Or, yeah, or limitations, right?
Or
Because they can,
limitations.
you know, again, we've talked about that, we've dealt with some really complicated ones, right? And you know how that, you know, so that's gonna, so when you get to something that is that large, it's gonna have conditional use permit, neighbor notifications, public hearing. You're gonna walk through, you know, what this plan actually looks like and what those impacts might be. You might set some reasonable, specific, measurable conditions to them, and
What was
and
that?
ask, you know, and ask that they agree to it,
Specific
and then
measurable?
yeah. So all of the
Stands
things
on.
that are Act 67. That's my Act 67 plug.
So if we do go back to the statute, 60, and it shows that the zoning regulation, and there's the 3 criteria, it's not an or, it's all of them,
No,
correct?
it's
Or.
one.
So Eckler Brothers,
Oh, it's one.
Eckler Brothers said that it was or.
Or,
Yep.
got it.
And you'll see in the village, in their ordinance, they reference that first. So,
Okay, got it.
any other questions on village before I head to city? Right. Heading over to city. So, City of Wisconsin Rapids. I'll just do the same overview with you there, and then I'm going to point out some of the stuff that I like about what they've done. I would just also maybe note, and I kind of prefaced these comments with it, particularly the city, they've updated this process a couple times. Okay, so they didn't, this, as you see it today, wasn't what they started with. They, you know, went through this, assessed how this was working in their community, and updated their ordinance. They also did a pretty significant update to their ordinance, so some of the things that look really nice is because they did update their ordinance with Civitech, I believe it was. So some of the things that they have are potentially what your ordinance could have, you know, as far as how it looks going forward.
Can you
So-
just share, so it's on the record, that Civitech is the one that did our zoning hub? And
Yes,
so people
they
are
are.
aware of that?
I
So-
thought I recognized the name.
Yeah, it's Tim Schwecky from Civitech, so he's the one that did what you're gonna,
Yes.
just so people can put the two together.
So, similar to the last community that we looked at, they have the City of Wisconsin Rapids has that solar permitting overview page. Okay, it's actually 2 pages. I'm gonna gloss through that and go right to the 3rd page in that packet, but we'll come back to the overview page. So, the 3rd page in that section, you'll see how they set their uses up, okay? Along the top are their districts. Along the left, so the column on the left is all your uses. Okay, that's their, I would call that a summary table. That summary table tells me if I'm interested in finding the use, I'm looking for the use, and there that is, about halfway down the page. It's probably, well, it is highlighted for you. They have building mounted and ground mounted solar energy systems. Now, just note that they do have in a different section larger systems. I forget what they call it, but they have a term for larger systems and a different way of treating those. I didn't include that in your packet, but just understand that they have building and ground mounted in this very similar fashion to the Village of Plover, and then they have a larger one. It's not utility scale. It's just a larger, small scale, if you will, like a medium scale.
Below 200 megawatts. Profit.
Below 100, yeah.
Oh, still under
It's
100.
It is, yeah. So
Okay.
we're not talking about utility scale.
At
We're
all.
just, nothing's talking about utility scale, but we're talking about, the city does have, along with the building and the ground mounted, the city has a 3rd section, a 3rd use, that is anything larger than that. Kind of similar to how the village does.
But
their-
not utility.
Yeah, but not utility.
Thank you.
Okay, so then, just to give you kind of a breakdown of how this is treated then, so if we go to building mounted, okay, what that is saying is, first off, you have to jump over, just, let's leave the review step for a second. What that's saying is it's permitted in every district, first off, is the P's all along. What it's further saying is that with building mounted systems, it requires a zoning permit. That's the ZP. with ground-mounted installations, again, permitted across the board, requires site plan and zoning permit is what that means. My recollection is the larger category required the conditional use permit, which is similar to what the
Clover?
Village of Clover is doing. So then, the other nice thing that the city does is the way that their ordinance is set up, if you flip the page, so now we're moving on from the summary table, and we're looking at an appendix that they have that gives you definitions and regulations for each of these uses. And so you'll see they have their building mounted supplemental standards, right? And so those are the standards that exist for the building mounted systems. They have then ground mounted, so in the same way, they have a ground mounted section and they have the supplemental standards. If you go to the end of the ground mounted one, you'll see that what they do is they set some thresholds.
Yeah,
So they say if you have two or more ground-mounted systems, or I believe if it's above a certain size, if I recall, then they categorize that into that third category that I didn't include for you. So that's how they move it from ground-mounted small to ground-mounted larger review, the conditional use permit. They're essentially doing the same things between these communities. I wanted to give you an example of how this is, it's laid out a little differently, but the process, the review is pretty similar. With the note, though, that what the city is doing is requiring the zoning permit, okay, in all of those situations, versus in the village, they're requiring just a building and electrical permit in some of those situations. The city is doing the zoning permit and all, and then in about the mid-range is doing the zoning and the site plan, and then the high range is doing conditional use permit. Think of it as those tiers. The Village of Plover is doing building and electrical, conditional use permit, and site plan. Kind of those three. So give some thought to it, because again, I think there may be benefits in having maybe a zoning
Tiers.
permit and tiering it like that. It would make some sense, and really it just comes down to what that process might look like, what the concerns might be in this community, and how you might want to regulate it. But I think then, just going back to, so what is the city doing well? As much as I like the village's overview, I like the way that the city has it better. I like the information in the villages, but I really like the roadmap that the city presents in this summary page. If I'm looking to install something like this in the city, this page, I don't even need to look in the ordinance yet. If I just start at this page, I'm going to understand the roadmap to getting my approval, right? The supplemental standards, for example, are right there, summarized well. I do
You
like.
can't get it any clearer.
Yeah, I do
mean,
like the
it's-
summary. I like the summary table. I like the way that this ordinance lays out its uses. If you think about somebody coming into a community and saying, "Can I do this use here?" You can tell that this table is inspired by the same developer as Zoning Hub, right? It's got a very similar approach. This is a summary table that tells me if I look for the use, is it permitted, is it conditional, or is it just not allowed? And also what kind of permit, if any, is required. It's nice that they have that. I also like, and if you went into their ordinance, you'll see they have this exact thing for all uses. It's just so you trace that to the next page, you look through the use and it'll tell you your standards, your supplemental standards. They do a good job with that. I think it does make it a little bit easier to maneuver. However, just note that I do think that this is a little bit more complex than when you look at how the Village of Plover. So you are giving up a little bit of that when you go to the simpler regulations, but I do like the way that the city lays out their regulations, and I think they recognize that, yes, it is a little bit more complex, so they put a little bit more time and effort into the roadmap, the summary sheet, so you're not drowning in the ordinance to find what you need to do. So I thought that was it was a good one to give you guys to use as a reference point for two reasons. Number one, it gives you very similar in how they approach their regulations, right? So we can see very similar approaches to those regulations. They're dividing it out, roof mounted, ground mounted, and even dividing out the scale of the ground mounted, right? Different ways of approaching it, zoning permit, right? Versus just building an electrical, for some of those smaller systems, or ground or roof mounted systems as well. And then being consistent with case law and how you need to approach that when you get those bigger developments, having that case by case review is in both of these, right? And so again, I thought it was important to give you just the overview, give you a resource to reference in the legal framework that we're working within, but then also leave you with a couple examples of how communities are doing it. You can go to other communities, you can see that a lot of them are dividing these out in those kind of ways. But these are two that are in our general area that are doing I think a good job at it. Not that they were doing this exact job right from the start, they weren't. In fact, I know the city of Wisconsin Rapids has updated theirs, particularly this solar permitting fact sheet. I know they've done at least one, maybe two reviews or updates to that to get it to this point. So some of it is just getting some regulations in place, evaluating how that's working for the community, and adjusting things as you go along.
What was the time frame of when they first started this, the solar permitting fact sheet, and how long has this been, like 4, 5, 6, 10 years?
I want to say with the city it might have been, with the city they became a Soul Smart community back in 2016 or 17.
Okay.
Part of being the Soul Smart community was you can be like silver tier, gold tier, and I believe the city is gold tiered, which means that along with their commitment to being a Soul Smart community, they had to put in place regulations that are efficient in processing these kind of developments. So I want to say that the city started this in maybe 17, 18, the first iteration, and have since done a couple updates to it. The Village of Plover, I believe, is also a Soul Smart community. They may even reference it in their documents. I don't know when they first put that, those regulations in place. If I had to guess, it is more recent, only because I know that they hired a really good planner that has done some, pretty incredible things there. And so it wouldn't be surprising to me in the least if he brought some of those updates to the village.
Is the village president, who is that in the Village of Plover? There's a town and a village in the city, right? There's all three, or is it just the village and the city?
There's a town of Plover and there's a village of Plover.
Village of Plover. Which one is Jim the?
Town.
Thank you. So this is only for the village, not the town?
These are the villages, yeah.
Okay.
But I hope that answers your question. I think
Yeah.
the point
I was
being
just wondering
that this took some time
the evolution of it.
to reevaluate, figure out what's working, what's not, and what permits they might want. Certainly the city has been doing it for some time.
This is very helpful, the way you broke this out for us. This is not utility. This is all
Correct.
all below that, but it gives us ideas on how to structure it so that we can deal with different sizes and that, because I can see what you're saying, like you could have a huge manufacturing facility or what have you, wherever it might be, say like an AI building up in Rapids, and they could have the whole roof line
Well,
filled
let's say
with panels.
Permar came in and wanted to do solar.
Well, and then my other question was too,
Yeah.
if, especially in RTC, if we're gonna have multifamily use buildings or apartment complexes or senior living facilities, those possibly could be roof mount systems. Or, so I was just curious to find out, it's just electrical in a building, for a large building of that sort. I just, was where my brain was going. This Midwest Renewable Energy Association, is that something that we could tap as well? That was in the Village of Plover. They teamed up with, to become a Soul Smart, I don't know.
Well, that's the Soul Smart thing that I was
But
talking about.
Soul Smart-
So
Soul
that,
Smart, you
that
gotta-
was with them
you gotta
becoming a
gauge-
Soul Smart.
So let me just say that, yes, so Soul Smart is a program. That's the grouping that you'd work with to become a Soul Smart community. They have a model ordinance. I didn't include the model ordinance. You can absolutely go and look at it. The only thing to note is a model ordinance from them is little to no barriers, as you can imagine.
Because they're for solar
Yes.
energy.
So,
Is that not a fraction of Renew Wisconsin?
I
believe that
yeah, I
Soul
don't,
Smart
I don't
is on
know, but it might be, or they may be maybe working with input from them or,
Yes.
or in conjunction with them. I didn't include it because I think you would have seen, and if you go out and look, you will see that there's little regulation in their model ordinance, because Soul Smart, right, has they aspire to have very easy processes to put these systems in. And that's not that's a bad thing, but I didn't want you to think that no communities were regulating this in different ways, and I wanted you
Okay.
to see how examples of community regulations might look for you, because I'm certainly not advocating that if you're putting regulations in place that you put nothing in. I think if you're looking at putting those in, if you're going to go through this process, then I think it's worth taking a look at what scale of systems, what types of systems you're regulating, and what those regulations would look like. So certainly can go out and pull those, and if you do, I think you'll see that it's pretty
Okay.
low standards that they have.
That was a good question, though, that you had an opportunity to point that out, because it goes down a path that maybe our community isn't it gives you nothing hardly at all. This gives us something that's.
I didn't
for
know if it was a
small scale.
resource we could have utilized.
No,
but-
because
But
not
now
a
I
lot
know.
of people know.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people know these names that are out there, and even our own utility companies like Alliance south of us and Adams Columbia Electric Co-op, they're bound by the state law right now that by 2030 they have to be so compliant, and by 2050 they have to be so compliant. So that's something else we're up against as a community, and this helps us get some things in line for small scale solar that could be helpful. Now, granted, there are people out there that don't mind solar, but then again, like Nick said, how did you say that? No regulations.
Well, if
Little to no.
yeah, I mean, if you don't have any, one thing that you'll see in this resource is if you don't have any regulations, then there are no regulations to
For
this.
small scale, so that's why it's timely
you can
that
do what you
this,
want.
because you're gonna see more, because the energy companies are forced
You know,
to.
there may be, I should qualify, I mean, there may be electrical permitting in that, but
Yeah.
very little regulations if you're not putting them in. If you do want to ensure that some of these medium scale, for example, systems are, regulated in ways that minimize or mitigate the impacts on surrounding properties and the neighborhoods, then you need to have some regulations for it.
And the local channels are beginning to advertise on a regular basis. Every evening
It's because the deadlines are coming up.
for installations on houses.
So in Ecker, when you were discussing that, that was with wind regulation, but they were saying that it would likely be challenged in a solar regulation.
Yeah, so,
And I don't understand that.
well, so Eckler Brothers, when you look at what is the case law, what's the guidelines that we follow, Eckler Brothers is the case that would set this. And so
Okay.
if there was a challenge ever brought, it'd be under Eckler Brothers right now. Now, there has been more recent case law with wind energy systems, but those were specific to wind energy. And so in this case, the Eckler Brothers case would be what would be on point for these kind of regulations.
Even though it states in here that when the Wisconsin Court of Appeals reviewed it, it was regarding wind turbines.
Correct.
So there is some language in there that's beneficial, but can you address how the Numeric and the city of Mequon did have some impact as well?
I'm not sure if that's in here or not.
It is on
so-
page 12 of page 3, but we're not going by those numbers because it'll just confuse people.
It's on that same page over
It's on the
the
same
last
page
paragraph.
as Ecker Brothers.
Yep.
And that's the one where they really changed the
Well, I think the key piece to take out of that would be the statement that I think maybe that's why you were asking that. What
Yes.
You were, that no regulations in that case allowed them to start their construction without any municipal approval.
And that was
that-
for a smaller project, not a large project.
It was, right.
The under 100 megawatts, I believe, right?
So, yes, I mean, so something like that is maybe an underscore to the idea that
You
if you
need
don't have
regulations
regulations, then, there really isn't approval steps there that are required, and they can begin that installation without it, and that was what the case found, that's right.
Kind of like CAFOs, no regulations?
This was very good.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry the other folks missed it, but you won't be here to do it. Lexi could do it again, but do it with them privately. I won't sit through it. We're all caught up to speed, so have fun. Huh?
I'll send them the link.
Yeah.
So if I gave maybe some recommendations for next steps, I would say give some thought to how you might want to approach regulating this. You can certainly look at other communities, but, these are two good examples of how you might approach it.
Uh,
And, yeah.
Have either one of these been tested at all? As far as judicially, or do you know? Have there been
I'm not-
challenges to what they've proposed or done here?
I'm not aware of any challenges to either of those communities, no.
Okay.
But I'm quite certain that each of them have run installations through their ordinances and likely have updated, at least the city has probably updated it as a result of that.
Okay.
But along with kind of giving some thought to the framework, also give some thought to what kind of permitting you might think would be appropriate. Then you can look at these examples as maybe some starting guidelines, but you'll see that they have some regulations to those different tiers of developments, right? So what are those regulations going to be, for those, well, are they setback? Are they positioning in the yard in residential districts, those kind of things? So just start, I would say, making a list of things that you might be interested in seeing in an ordinance and how that might be positioned, and then I think having a follow-up meeting and kind of talking through that and seeing where you want to go with it, and then kind of working through it as it relates to updating the ordinance.
Okay. It's all very timely. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad we did this, so, I don't know if Lex wanna. I like the idea of the, conditional use permit for this, but, because it seems to be used in the proper context, as well as the zoning permit, like we just did with
Well,
short-term
it's the site
rentals.
plan.
Pardon?
depending on the size, as well as the site plan.
Yes, the site plan, plan of
Right.
operation.
Right.
That all makes, and that's what we're trying to build ourselves to as we're working through all these different issues.
Well, and it
Even
is,
the
it is kind of interesting to see how some of the past conversations and things we've worked through kind of all come together in this, right? As we look at different thresholds, right? Is it a zoning permit? Is it a conditional use permit? Does that sound familiar, right? I mean, we
Yeah.
just had a conversation and worked through that, with different use, right? With short-term rentals. So it is kind of a good capstone to that because there are a lot of similarities in how they're approaching it.
Did you want to add anything, Lexi, or?
Oh, why, you kept looking like you wanted to say something.
She always looks like she wants to.
Well, you picked up your piece of paper and it looked like you wanted to say,
So, to bring the other commissioners up to speed, I suppose we should give them the opportunity to review this and maybe come back in April.
Yeah, I would wait, because we've got enough on our plate for the next meeting.
Right. So if we came back in April to begin the construction of ordinances, if that's what we want to
Okay.
do?
I think some of the legwork could be started with Lexi to come forward perhaps with some framework or ideas. I mean, correct? Or you'd want to start fresh in April.
I'm thinking that the answer to Diana's question is just you bifurcate the residential versus commercial solar mounted roof installations. And then you deal with those separately. And that'll take care of your issue. So you'll actually have 4 groups.
If-
You'll have-
Yeah, I
If we-
guess.
You'll have a
if-
homeowner or a property owner, just a homeowner installation.
Well, yeah, your roof,
Usually
your
be
ground
a
mount,
permit,
depending upon size, and then your business applications.
Right.
Yeah.
And that'll cover your concern. And it could be a little bit more extensive than just a electrical permit.
I do like the way Rapids, has their stuff all laid out. I'm just gravitating towards that one.
I like definitions.
I think
like
it's
it
a very
all.
good,
I'd call it idiot proof, but I don't mean that as an insult. It's like you
No,
can
I'd
go
like
right to
to-
2
I'd like to
pages,
see
3 pages,
our
and you got,
ordinances placed in a matrix like that.
so I would lean towards not plagiarizing. I don't think that's a good word to use.
it's a fine word, a
A
template. There you
template,
go.
thank
There you
you.
go, that militaristic approach. Template,
Sounds like a business person.
a business person. But
Okay.
I do like what Plover has, spelled out in there so too, and I wouldn't want to lose sight of that. I mean, we like the
Well, there are-
formatting and the structure of Wisconsin Rapids. You're looking at a foundation, a format, but some of what's being said in Plover
Well,
is
yeah,
very simplistically spelled out, and I wouldn't want to lose sight of that. It would just fit into this structure.
Okay, so April, we'll give them a time, ability to
Chop, chop, Lexi.
look at it, and then,
10?
do we have any other discussion on this
10?
aspect
Oh,
of it?
on that one? No. You're gonna go back to item 10?
I am wondering, does he need to be present for this?
Well, I would hate to hold him up anymore. Does he have?
Were there
let's
any
ask her-
objections from what you saw? Because I was really, I liked what he did with the landscape plan. I liked with the detail he gave us on setbacks and things. I think he met all the requirements that we were asking for, and I would hate to have him held up.
That's
So
where I
what
was
I
gonna
would
go
like to
with
do
that
is
too.
go to item 10 and make a motion for it.
Well, I just want to hear from Lex though, because
Okay.
he isn't here, and if she called him to be here, if there's any outstanding things that she needs to bring to our attention.
Well, why don't
But I'm
you,
of the same
I don't think
persuasion
so.
as.
I will,
Bill.
okay, let's do a discussion, possible recommendation of town board, consideration of an amendment to the site plan of operation requested by Stuffit Storage LLC to update their site plan from the previous owner's plan on property located at State Highway 13, described as Lot 2, CSM 2313, located in part of the SE 1/4, Northwest 1/4, Section 17, Town 20, North Range 6 East, Town of Rome, Adams County, Wisconsin, with a parcel number of 03000790000.
All right. So applicant Stuffit Storage LLC requests approval for the revision to their site plan of operation for the property located on State Highway 13. Applicant received initial approvals for the site plan on November 8th, 2022 and November 14th, 2023 from Plan Commission. The applicant is amending the site plan of operation to completely redo the building design and operation plans from the previous property owner. For reference, the last approved site plan of operation for November 2023 is also included in your packet. A copy of the conditions associated with that approval are also included in your packet. This item had a public hearing during the January 14th Plan Commission meeting, where it was postponed to the February 11th, 2025 meeting, so corrections could be made and clear materials could be submitted for the site plan.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve or send through a positive recommendation to the town board for the approval of this project, including the findings of fact. But I want to make sure that on the findings of fact, we add that it's with the submittal of the landscape plans that he submitted tonight. I don't know if it's included in the findings of fact as it stands. I want to make sure that the plan that he submitted is followed through on.
So do we want, are you saying you want, oh, we don't have a second yet for discussion.
No,
but-
you don't. I'm just adding that to the findings of fact. that's
He's
all.
got a, I guess his question is, does he need to put that in the findings of fact?
Are you saying though, Bill, that with the findings of fact, like other ones we've approved, they still don't have their landscaping
have
done?
findings
So
of
you
fact?
want to assure that
Finding
there's
of
a
facts,
deadline?
But I guess the question is, are you saying the new, because the newest, what I gave you were the newest renditions, because he ended up by sending me newer site plans
Right,
the day after I sent out the packet.
right.
So what you guys ended up by receiving are like the newest site plans that he ended up by submitting.
And what I'm saying is I want to just make sure that those are stipulated as what
Okay.
we want him to follow through on.
So I think what you're asking to do is incorporate those by reference and perhaps indicating the date that he submitted or the most recent
Yeah,
one being the one
That's what I'm
that
asking.
is expected to be followed is probably a good idea since we have a couple different iterations of a
that's
landscaping
the
plan.
problem.
That also gives me the chance to ask the question. In the previous findings of fact, there were conditions, right? One of them probably not relevant anymore because it's not a condominium. But one of them was a condition for no outside storage. Would you like that also to be part of the
is
findings of
correct.
fact?
But I also want to know though, too, there were other things we discussed. Buffers on the residential side, depending on how far back he builds. And two, there was supposed to be verification that there would be no issues with that easement with the other property owner.
Well, then
Have
maybe-
those been
then maybe you
addressed?
better bring them back.
No, we don't need to bring
Answers.
them back. I think they might be able to answer the questions. Let's just,
I'm for all not bringing them back, but
did he address the buffers? Because I didn't see it on the plan, the
There
buffers
was,
on the
on
residential.
that one, this one, he's got, this is the back area with the landscape that he's got going. See, that would have been back here. And then he's got the landscaping all along the side
But this
here.
would be on the south side.
Yes, that's all right in here.
All right.
And then he's got this buffering between
road.
Highway 13 and that. And this is
I
off
didn't
the
know if
back.
these were pine trees that are already there.
Well,
'cause
this,
it
no,
Cleared
I
back
think he's
further,
got, maybe.
but I was just asking because we did have that one, it's in our minutes, and we did have that one, a lady expressed a concern that it's behind her, and he said he would accommodate by buffering that up a bit, and I didn't see on the south side of that. And then also about the easement, there was a question about the easement with the driveway, if the other owner they've worked through that. So do you know those answers?
I don't. Like I said, I included that long email. That's what I sent him of ordinances because he asked me what you guys asked for, and I pulled up everything that I thought you guys would like from him. And then from that, he gave me the rendition that was in your packet, and then
Right.
I sent him another email, which basically I asked him for setbacks, which is why he removed the sign. I did not include that email in I forgot to include that email because it had his personal information in there and I didn't want to redact. But, that's why the sign got actually removed and it got put on the building itself. And that's how we ended up with the newest rendition.
So the email that we have to Shane with carbon copied Amanda Dolph on it, it says where trees are used for, it's highlighted.
Yep.
Trees must be a minimum of 4 feet tall at the time of planting, buffer trees, but we don't really specify on which sides of those buildings. So can we,
It does specify that there does need to be buffers between different zones, so if he is zoned business, which it should be.
Oh,
That would
perfect.
be technically, that would be then zoned residential where that.
because I
where that-
wasn't sure how she was zoned, if that was business or residential.
It should be residential if I believe she's residential. I can double check, but I'm almost 100% positive she's residential.
Because there's other stuff going on there that would lead you to believe it's not zoned residential unless it's spot zoned over there. But that's why and the other thing was that easement on the driveway, so
Well,
there's
and that
no-
was not in the email. That was not addressed in the email with regard to him providing us, although we did mention it at the meeting.
So could we add something in the findings of fact that would state that he has to come back with clear indication that there'll be no issues with the other owner on the easement?
You could technically add it as a condition, and you could even put that he clarify that before final approval by the board.
There you
Which
go.
would just, that would move it to the board.
Right, I
As
don't
long
wanna
as
hold
what
it
you're, if what you're looking to do is just get some assurances before a final approval, you could just do it as that, and then he would be to come to the board and provide any information relevant to that. It'll be just important, I think, that that Lexi communicate what what the town's looking for, so he can be ready to talk that through with the board.
Well, then I'm good on the buffers with the residential, as long as we're sure that
It's
that's
two different sub-districts. then.
perfect, then I'm fine with that. But the easement is the piece
So
that,
the
because I know there were concerns with the easement with other
Recommendation is
owners.
give a favorable approval to the plan with the addition of that we make sure that it is the final landscape plan that he follows. And number two, that he has worked out the issue of the driveway sharing with the property owner next door.
Or the property
And no
owner,
outside storage.
and no outside storage.
And no outside storage, yes, we want to keep that one.
And we need that before
So
it
that's-
comes to
I'll
town
amend
board
my
on this.
motion to include all three of those in the findings of fact. Will you accept the
I didn't make
amendment?
a second.
Is there
What he did?
a date on that landscape plan, Lexi, that we're looking at?
I believe it would have been on the 5th. I think I sent this to you guys on the 4th. I can double check though, but it got sent the day after I sent this packet, so I can go back and double check the dates.
So it's the landscape plan.
This is one of the best
Dated.
packets we've,
The landscape plan that was
itself is
presented in
dated
February of
1/26.
2025.
It's dated 1/26/2025.
Okay, 1/26,
That's the one
2025.
that's the one
Okay.
I'm referencing.
Okay.
and the reason I asked that too is these plants are on the south side, but I got my sides turned around. The reason it came up was she's on the north side of him. So this shows on the south, she's on the north.
She is?
Yeah. Anawa Court, or Anawa, whatever it is over there, she's on the north. The
Okay.
woman that was here is here, here's the buildings he's
Okay.
proposing.
I got
So
my-
she's to the north. That's why that's why I brought it up again. This shows, if you look Highway 13 here, it's showing it to the south where the residential's over on the north. So that's why the verification, I think, is important, that does get, depending on the district. Okay, yeah.
Do we have a second?
I'll second the
Okay.
motion.
So a motion's been made by Bill Capel to make a recommendation of the town board to approve the site plan of operation for,
Shane Roosh.
Stuffit Storage LLC with the findings of fact that will have a condition of no outside storage, verification that the easement of the driveway, that there is a shared easement for ingress and egress to the property, and that the landscape design from January 26, 2025 will be incorporated in the site plan of operation. Okay? Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Recommendation to the board is approved. And, let's see, the next agenda item, land purchase document. And, is that in, huh?
Go ahead, I'm sorry, I thought you were done. I'm sorry, I thought you were done.
And we're going to begin the PPP for the comprehensive plan and determine our resources that we'll be utilizing initially with what their services would be and how much the potential charge would be per hour or whatever, however they charge, I don't know. And that, like, you'll try to get that information for us. And then, that's all I think I have.
Solar permitting.
AI, solar.
Oh, the
permitting and
I think that was.
that was April.
April.
Because we were
that's
gonna give a chance for the other guys to do some digestive procedure on that.
right. Unless
It was the
Lexi thinks
PPP, it
there's
was the
some-
resources, and it was an outline of what you wanted to do first.
Yes, that would be
Those were
on,
the three things.
right. Anything else? Are we, what?
AI, anything we want to do as far as regulating AI, large facilities in the town?
Well, it's one of my concerns, you know, everyone's concerned about solar, but I think with, what's going on with regard to the building of all of these huge
Data facilities.
data facilities and AI and and what they draw on the grids and everything else, and because of the land uses that we have available to them to do this kind of development, that's kind of a concern of mine. And I don't know if it's something we should be addressing or even worrying about at this point. But anyway, that's,
Bring it up during the comprehensive plan. I think that's worthy of discussion.
yeah, and that,
'Cause it is
especially
it's
with the
way
solar
on the-
farms that
it's
are
way
going up,
on the
we
grid,
might
yeah.
I'm
have,
serious.
you know, I think it'll be something that
I
we
think
should
that
really
we
be
can
looking at.
incorporate that in our discussions.
And I guess I would like to know, I've gotten, comments made to me about, storage containers, on 8th Avenue by the lake. And, in checking with the county, it's not a structure, so I don't know what the difference is between a storage container and a structure, but then found out that that's part of the nano bubbler project. So I think at some point, you know, where does the permitting come in and who's responsible for it?
They need to make an individual complaint with me.
Huh?
That needs to be an individual complaint made with me.
With you? Even though it's in shoreland? A complaint has to be filed? I'll tell them.
Oh, and the next, any other things that anybody wants to talk about next time? I won't be here, by the way.
No, she'll be in Florida. All the rest of us are freezing.
No wonder you wanted to load us up.
Well, I could think of a few more things, Bill,
Well,
but
she has to be here virtually.
okay, so the next meeting date and time would be March 11th, 2025 at 4 p.m.
Perfect.
All right? If someone wants to move to adjourn, go for it.
To adjourn.
Chair has the right.
Second, okay, we got a motion move, second, we're done. Meeting adjourned. It is 5:53.
Awesome.
Jerry.
When I